She lived alone. No husband, no children, just a whispering wind and the weight of her past. Then one evening, 7 giant Comanche warriors appeared at her door, exhausted, armed, mysterious. They didn't ask. They needed shelter. She could have said no, but something in their eyes, something in his eyes, made her heart pause. Who were they running from? What secrets did they carry? And when one of them fell for her, it wasn't just love on the line. It was her life, her land, her soul. This is a story of wild survival, unexpected love, and a woman who dared to open her door to the unknown. The land had no mercy, and neither did she. Maven hadn't spoken aloud in 6 days, not since she slit the throat of a coyote caught skulking near her chicken coop. Words felt like clutter now, clumsy things left behind in a world that no longer fit her. She'd traded softness for silence, warmth for caution. She lived in a cabin that leaned like an old man into the wind, creaking its bones through every storm. And the wind out here never quit. Her boots scraped across the porch as she stepped into the dying light, a jug of rainwater in one hand and a rifle balance in the other. The horizon burned orange and violet, broken only by the crooked ribs of old fence posts and the silhouettes of juniper trees. Somewhere out beyond the flats, wolves were beginning to howl. She listened, counted them. 4, maybe 5. She liked the sound of wolves. They didn't pretend to be anything they weren't. The land around her cabin stretched for miles in every direction, all thorn brush and frostbitten grass, with no neighbors save the dead. Somewhere beneath the cottonwoods was her boy, buried shallow, in a patch where the frost couldn't quite reach. A wooden cross tilted beside the mound. No name carved. She hadn't the stomach for it. She poured water into the tin basin and scrubbed the blood from her hands. It wasn't hers. A squirrel this time. Dinner. She worked the knife clean against her apron, then hung it beside the door. The fire crackled inside, smoke curling up to the split log roof like ghost breath. Tonight would be cold, the kind of cold that settled in bones like regret. She closed the door, bolted it, and sat beside the hearth. Above the mantel hung 3 things: a longbow with string snapped, a sun-faded photograph of a man in cavalry blue, and a child's shoe barely large enough to fit her fist. She looked at none of them. It was nearly dark when the hoofbeats came, soft at first, like thunder bottled far off, then louder. 7 riders broke over the ridge without warning, their shapes towering and strange in the dusk. She was on her feet before the first of them reached the fence, the rifle already in her hands. They stopped 20 yards from the porch. She counted them with a soldier's eye. 7 Comanche men, massive, painted. One had feathers braided into his hair. Another wore the skull of a coyote as a headdress. All sat their horses like kings or executioners. She didn't lower the gun. A moment passed. The wind tugged at her dress. Her heartbeat kicked against her ribs. The tallest dismounted. His presence cracked the silence. His boots made no sound on the dirt. He stepped forward, bare-chested beneath his buffalo hide coat, a jagged scar curling up his side like a question never answered. He spoke first. His voice was deep, slow. "We don't come for blood, woman. We come for fire." Her finger twitched on the trigger. "Fire's mine. So's the ground it sits on. We don't want your ground." He looked past her toward the chimney smoke. "Storm's coming. Bad one. Wind spoke of it 3 nights now." She said nothing. The rifle didn't move. A second man rode forward. Younger. Softer eyes, but not soft. His face held that stillness she'd seen in soldiers who had killed and come to peace with it. He said something in Comanche, too quick for her to catch, but the leader shook his head. "Let us stay the night," the leader said. "We'll pay in meat. Or labor." "I don't need labor. You need watching." That stung more than she expected. The rifle dropped a fraction. The younger one dismounted now, slowly, his hands visible. His eyes met hers, dark and unreadable. He looked down at the porch, then at the slanted cabin, then back to her. "There are ghosts in your eyes, woman," he said. "Same as in mine." She didn't answer. The wind picked up, flinging dust through the dying light. Another silence fell, long and thick. Then Maven stepped aside. One night, you earn it. You don't earn it, you die under it. The leader gave a single nod. No gratitude, just understanding. Like the rules of some ancient code had been upheld. The rest dismounted. None made sudden moves. One removed his boots before stepping onto her porch. Another carried a bundle of branches, firewood, cut clean. Inside, the cabin shifted with their presence. Too small for 8 souls. It groaned under the weight of breath and heat and history. She watched them with wary eyes, every muscle coiled. They laid down their weapons at her word. Not all of them. Not the knives they wore on their hips like promises. She ladled stew into tin bowls. Salt pork and squirrel. No one spoke for a while. The only sound was a pop of fat in the flames and the wind rattling loose shutters. The younger one sat across from her. He hadn't touched the food yet. His gaze moved slowly over the cabin, taking it in, mapping the scars of her life with quiet reverence. Then his eyes found the child's shoe hanging above the mantel. His brow furrowed. "I knew a boy once," he said softly. "Looked at the world the same way that shoe looks at that fire, like it couldn't decide whether to burn or run." She stiffened. "Say less," she warned. He nodded, said no more. The night deepened. The storm came as promised, howling across the plains, rattling the roof with sleet and the cries of dying wind. One man muttered a prayer in Comanche. Another sharpened a blade against stone, rhythmic and slow. Maven sat at the fire with her rifle beside her knee and stared into flames until her reflection blurred. She didn't sleep, but neither did they. Come morning, she'd know whether she'd made a mistake. But in that moment, something in her cracked, not loudly, not all at once. Just a hairline fractured down the wall she'd spent years building. And through that hairline, something breathed. Not trust, not yet, but something close enough to haunt her. The storm stayed 3 days. It came howling over the ridge like a wounded god, snapping branches and tearing shingles from the roof. Snow whipped sideways across the windows, thick as ash, choking out the horizon until the world narrowed to wood in fire and breath. Maven didn't speak much. Neither did they. 7 Comanche warriors filled her cabin like carved statues, unmoving and unreadable. They slept in turns. They mended their gear with leather cords and traded murmurs in a language that flowed like wind over stone, guttural yet solemn. One sang low at night, a song that twisted to the smoke and settled into her bones. She learned their names not by asking, but by listening. The leader was Ronita, a man carved from ironwood, his eyes pale with storms. The others moved around him like moons in orbit, but it was the youngest, Tamakyo, who caught her notice. He watched her differently, not with suspicion or threat, with recognition. Maven had lived a lifetime reading glances. She knew hunger. She knew fear. What she saw in Tamakyo was neither. It was memory. On the second night, she caught him studying the shelf beside the hearth. Dusty relics lined it. A cracked compass, a feather once bright blue, a carved bear totem smoothed by time. His fingers drifted toward the totem, but didn't touch. Later, after the others slept and only embers lit the room, he spoke. "That bear," he said. "It belonged to my cousin." Maven didn't turn. She was oiling her rifle, slow and quiet. He was 5, Tamakyo said. During the winter raid near Painted Bluffs, cavalry took the village, burned every home. He disappeared that night. No one ever found him. Her hand stilled. "I found him," she said, "half dead in the snow. Hid him in my cellar for 2 days. Fed him bread soaked in broth. Why didn't you bring him back?" "My husband," she answered. Her voice cracked like old bark. "Was a soldier. Found the boy. Said if I didn't hand him over, he'd shoot us both. So I waited till he passed out drunk and smuggled the boy to a trapper who was heading east. Paid him in silver and prayer." Tamakyo was silent. Then, gently, he said, "The boy lived. He came back 3 winters later, but he never spoke again." Maven finally looked at him. "Then it was for nothing." "No," he said, "it was for everything." She looked away, shame pooling under her ribs like bad whiskey. There were things she had done to survive, things she had failed to stop. The past had teeth. That night, she didn't sleep. She sat in her rocking chair with her rifle and stared into the fire, remembering the boy's tiny hands wrapped around that carved bear, his breath shallow and warm against her chest. She remembered her husband's boot crushing the cellar door, the sound of the boy's name dying in her throat. Outside, the wind screamed. Inside, she trembled without moving. The third morning broke cold and pale. The storm had passed, leaving the land glazed in ice and silence. The Comanches stirred like wolves after hibernation. One by one, they stepped out into the snow, quiet and methodical, their movements precise. They did not say goodbye, but they didn't leave. Instead, they split wood. They fetched water. One set a rabbit snare. Another replaced the wind-stripped shingles without being asked. Ronita said nothing. He only watched. Tamakio approached Maven with a wrapped bundle. Inside was cornbread, dense and warm, with sweetgrass folded into the dough. "You didn't have to," she said, puzzled. "You fed us." She accepted it, biting back the impulse to hand it back. Pride had a long shadow. She was tired of standing in it. By nightfall, her cabin had never been quieter, and never less empty. She caught herself watching Tamakio, the way he moved without noise, the way his eyes lingered on the fire like he'd seen too much and still hoped it might burn something clean. He didn't talk often, but when he did, the words mattered. Once, he asked if the cross outside belonged to her husband. "No," she said. "That grave's for my son." He looked down. "I'm sorry." "So am I." The wind shifted. A hawk cried overhead. Something passed between them. Not romance, not yet, but recognition. A shared ache. He handed her a bundle of sage that night. Said it kept the bad dreams away. She lit it, unsure she believed in anything anymore. But the scent was warm and earthy, and for once, the silence didn't feel like a punishment. Then, just after midnight, a sound cracked the stillness. A horse. Maven froze. Tamakio and two others were already crouched, blades drawn. She peeked through the slat in the wall. A man in a thick coat rode toward the cabin from the north trail. Settler, alone but heavily armed. His coat flapped like a war flag. He knocked once, sharp. She opened the door with her shotgun low. "Well now," he said, smiling too wide. "Didn't expect company this far out. I live here." He squinted past her shoulder. Saw smoke 2 nights back. Thought maybe Indians took the place. "You all right?" She nodded. "Just me?" "You sure?" "Dead sure." He sniffed, eyes narrowing. "You cooking rabbit?" "Go home," she said. "Ain't nothing here but cold and old regrets." The settler chuckled, but he didn't push. Just spat into the snow and rode off. Maven watched until he vanished into the trees. Only when he was gone did the others step back into the light. Ronita grunted. "He'll come back. With others." "I know," Maven said. Outside, snow began to fall again, soft, deceptive. Inside, 7 men who had once been enemies stood ready for the war they all felt coming. She tightened her grip on the shotgun and met Tamakio's eyes. "I won't run this time," she said. He nodded once. "Neither will we." The fire snapped louder, as if it understood what was being promised. Maven didn't sleep that night either, but not from fear. Not anymore. Something had shifted in her marrow. She had lived alone for years, but now the silence wasn't hollow. It was full of waiting, full of purpose. Something had returned to her, she thought long buried. Not peace, but a reason to fight for it. The snow crusted thick over the cabin roof, turning it into a burial mound. Days passed, marked only by the slow melt of icicles and the cawing of distant crows. Maven began to wonder if time had forgotten them, if the outside world had swallowed its fury and left them in peace. But peace is always the longest lie. Inside the cabin, silence had grown companionable. The men had started to settle into the rhythm of her world. Cutting wood, fetching water, mending broken seams. They spoke in low Comanche to each other, and when they spoke to her, it was brief, deliberate. Only Tamakio spoke more than necessity demanded. He'd started leaving small things for her. extra roots in the morning forage, a bundle of dry pine needles for kindling, a wooden carving shaped like a crow. She kept it in her apron pocket. One evening, as dusk folded over the land, he stood beside her on the porch, shoulder to shoulder, neither speaking. She watched the horizon while he watched the snow. "You ever think about leaving this place?" he asked at last. Maven didn't answer right away. Her breath fogged in front of her like ghost smoke. "No, the world out there already took everything it wanted from me." He nodded, his jaw tight. "My father said the same before they hanged him." She turned her head. "They hanged him for defending our land. He didn't kill, just wouldn't leave. They said defiance was as bad as murder." Silence settled again, but it wasn't empty. It buzzed with the weight of two losses that mirrored each other too closely to name. Later that night, as she packed a crate of smoked meat, Maven noticed something tucked between the layers. Crinkled parchment, yellowed and torn. When she unfolded it, her breath caught. A bounty notice. 7 Comanche men. Names listed in crooked English. Ink stamped with dead or alive. Tamakio's name was there. So was Ronita's. She stared at it until her hands trembled. The parchment had been shoved carelessly, like a warning meant to be found. She didn't know whose hands had brought it in, whether it was one of the riders testing her loyalty or simply a grim relic that had made its way in by accident. But now it burned in her mind like a brand. That night, she didn't eat. She sat by the fire with a rifle across her knees, staring into the flames like they held an answer. Tamakio entered quietly, sat across from her, not speaking, just waiting. She pulled the parchment from her coat and tossed it onto the floor between them. He looked, didn't flinch, didn't lie. "I know," he said. "Why are you here?" He looked into her eyes, something ancient flickering there. "We didn't come to hide. We came to say goodbye." "To what?" "To the land, to the ghosts, to the part of ourselves we left behind in smoke." She stared at the paper. "They'll come. You know that. The one who knocked, he'll bring more. Men who think killing you will make them heroes." He nodded. "And if I keep you here, I'm no better than a grave digger." "I don't want you to die for us," he said. "But I won't run either. Not anymore." Maven stood slowly. Her knees cracked. The fire popped. "I'm not dying for you," she said. "But I'll be damned if I bury another child because I did nothing." He rose too, a quiet strength behind his movements. "I was never a child," he said. "Not after they burned my mother alive." She winced. Some pain you could feel without ever having lived it. "I have scars too," she whispered. "I know." They stood facing each other, no closer than before, but closer in truth. The next morning, Ronita called a meeting in the snow-swept yard. The 7 gathered, crouched around a burning stump. Maven stood outside the circle, her hands buried in her coat, listening. They debated in Comanche, quietly, like they knew the wind carried secrets. A younger one, hawk eyes, wanted to leave now, move north into the Black Hills. Red Oak, the oldest, disagreed. "Run again," he muttered, "and we leave our names behind." Maven caught only fragments. But the emotion was clear. They were tired of running, tired of being prey, tired of surviving without living. After the meeting, Tamakio approached her with a question that stopped her cold. "Would you leave this place if it meant saving us?" She looked at the cabin, at the grave under the pine tree, at the ridge where the wind curled like fingers. "No," she said, "but I'll burn to the ground if it means they don't take it from me." That night, she packed. So did the men. Not to flee, to prepare. By morning, they had fortified the cabin, reinforced the windows, dug shallow trenches, set tripwires along the east trail. The clearing became a battlefield in waiting. And still, the question lingered. Who had brought the bounty notice? Someone inside? Or had the settler scout left it behind as a promise? Maven didn't trust all 7. She couldn't afford to. One man, Tall Crow, had too many questions in his eyes, too much bitterness in his jaw. But she said nothing, kept her watch, slept in brief, knife-edged bursts. On the 3rd night, just before dawn, she heard the horses. Not hers, not theirs, She rose without thinking, shotgun in hand, slid out the front door as frost bit her cheeks. Dust on the horizon, orange lanterns, saddle squeaks. Men, at least 20. "They're here," she said. Tamakio joined her. His breath was steady. "We were never meant to live easy," he said. "Only honest." Maven stared into the rising sun and felt her blood turn molten. "I lived easy once," she said. "Didn't last." He looked at her, voice low. "You're not the woman I thought I'd find here." She cocked her rifle. "No, I'm worse." And this time, she didn't look away. The posse came with the sunrise. Dust rose around them like smoke from a funeral pyre. 20 men on horseback, rifles glinting, mouths set in lines as cold as the barrels they carried. Their leader rode at the front, the scout from days before, but now armored in certainty. He wore a coat stitched with cavalry blue and a belt lined with scalps that didn't belong to deer. Maven stood in the yard with her shotgun leveled, her shadow long behind her, eyes hollow but burning. The Comanche stood behind her in a loose arc, blades drawn, bows strung tight. They didn't speak. They didn't blink. The scout reined in just beyond the range of her shot. His horse snorted. "Well, hell," he said, grinning like a snake. "You always did know how to pick the wrong side." "I'm not on a side," she said. "I'm on my land." He spat. "That land stopped being yours the second you housed killers." Ronita stepped forward, his voice low and steady. "You bring death. You'll leave with less." The scout chuckled. "I got law behind me." "No," Maven said. "You've got paper. We've got truth." The standoff cracked like ice under a heavy foot. A single shot rang out, sharp, sudden, directionless. No one knew who fired first. All they knew was the world went white with sound. Gunfire tore through the clearing. Smoke thickened. Horses screamed. Maven dug behind the woodpile, pumping her shotgun and firing into the blur of dust and flesh. One rider fell, his chest blooming red. Another tumbled from his mount, clutching a leg wound. She moved like she'd been born to kill, like the years alone had sharpened her into something surgical and unforgiving. Inside the cabin, Red Elk shouted commands. Arrows flew from upstairs windows, whistling through the air with deadly grace. Tamakio fought beside her, blade in one hand, pistol in the other. They moved like two halves of the same broken thing. Scarred, fast, resolute. But even wolves can bleed. Tall Crow caught a bullet in the throat. He dropped wordless into the snow, blood steaming as it soaked the earth. Ronita took a shot to the shoulder, but didn't flinch. He pulled the bullet out with his bare hand, eyes blazing like firelit stone. Maven's legs buckled when she saw the settler breach the porch. He stormed toward her, revolver drawn, teeth gritted. "You should have stayed alone, bitch." She ducked his first shot. The second grazed her thigh, white heat ripping through skin. She screamed through clenched teeth, fell rolled, and came up hard against the porch beam. He advanced, gun raised. Then Tamakio was there. He tackled the man mid-step, blade flashing once, twice. Blood sprayed the doorframe. The settler slumped, his face a ruin. Tamakio staggered back, a bullet lodged just below his collarbone. Maven caught him before he hit the ground. "Stay with me," she rasped, cradling him. His breath was shallow, chest stuttering like a dying horse. "Not done yet," he said, voice brittle. She dragged him inside, laid him by the fire. Around them, smoke filled the cabin. Somewhere upstairs, the roof was burning. Screams echoed through the trees. Settlers fleeing, warriors pursuing. Chaos in all directions. Maven pressed a cloth to Tamakio's wound. "Don't close your eyes." He smiled faintly. "You're warm now, not like when I found you." "You didn't find me," she said. "I was waiting." Outside, the wind shifted. The cabin's roof groaned under fire. Flames crawled along the rafters like red spiders. She had minutes, maybe less. Around her, the walls she'd built with her husband's hands began to crack and sag. She grabbed the carving of the bear from the shelf, the totem that once comforted a dying child, and slipped it into her pocket. Then she took her father's old cavalry saber off the wall and kissed it once before tossing it into the fire. Let the old wars burn. She shouldered Tamakio and stumbled out the back door into the snow, the world around her a pyre of old sins and new blood. By dusk, the fight was done. 7 riders had come to her home. Only 4 would ride out again. They buried Red Elk and Tall Crow, beside her son under the pine. No prayers, just silence, and the sound of shovels cutting through half-frozen soil. The sky was the color of ash. Even the wind seemed to mourn. Maven stood at the graves with her coat torn and her leg bandaged tight. Smoke still curled from the blackened ruins of her cabin. She didn't look back. Ronita approached, his shoulder freshly bound, his voice roughened by pain. "We ride west tomorrow. What of you?" She stared out at the land, no longer empty, no longer quiet. "I rebuild. If not here, then near. You'll be hunted now." She nodded. "So will they, but they'll know better next time." Tamakio stepped forward. His face was pale, but his eyes sharp. "You don't have to stay." "I do," she said. "But you don't." He took her hand, rough, calloused, warm. "I'll stay close," he said. "Not too near. Just close enough for you to holler." She smiled for the first time in years. It cracked her lips. It healed something deeper. "I don't holler," she said. "No," he replied. "But maybe now you'll speak." She didn't answer. Instead, she turned toward the open land, the horizon pink with the promise of coming spring, and began to walk. The wind followed. So did he.